I'm speaking with Spanish artist Cristina Iglesias, whose latest work, Hondalea, I had the pleasure of experiencing in San Sebastian. It's her hometown, and it's repurposing an abandoned lighthouse for an amazing kinetic installation of bronze and water. Cristina joins me from her studio in Madrid, and we'll be discussing the evolution of her work over the last 2 decades, from her solo show at the Whitechapel Gallery in 2003 in London, and looking through the work that she's done with various architects in Madrid and Antwerp, and most recently London, where she produced a beautiful installation outside Sir Norman Foster's Bloomberg building in 2017 called Forgotten Streams. So obviously architecture has long been an interest for you, but the perspective was much more interior, and suddenly for the last 10 years it's been very exterior. And I was just fascinated to know what made this shift and what also gave you these opportunities to make work in public.
Yes, well, I honestly don't think there has been such a shift as such. I mean, I was interested, and I was at the time you were saying of the show, for example, at Whitechapel, to create places, to stay in or next or under or above, was always part of my themes and my interrogations. And I always felt I wanted to create places to be and interested in the way you approach a piece and the distance of looking. So all these, I think, has been also part of the public pieces or the approaches that I could say about those pieces. Of course, they are connected to opportunities, that you are given, or you suddenly appear to do something in outdoors, or to contribute or contribute to a specific project.
So which was your first? What was your first public project?
The first one was in 1993, and I did in Mosquenes in the Lofoten Islands. They were permanent, they are, and so I did this sort of standpoint to look at the sea, creating like a room with aluminum walls, a type of vegetation that doesn't belong to the Lofoten Islands.
Right.
And so I did this because Mosquenes also, I was inspired by the sea because of Edgar Allan Poe, the story he wrote on Maelstrom, that then I found out that it was based on a popular story there. So this eucalyptus leaves, I constructed this point of view to the sea, towards the sea. And that was my first, but then also at the show at Whitechapel, I have this very sculptural hanging ceiling.
Yeah.
That actually the impression when you look up was of fungi and strange vegetations that could look. It was like between lunar and lunar landscape and the bottom of the sea. So I was already, with those images and ideas that were already in my imaginarium at the time, and certainly constructing places like the geology places to enter.
Yes. And it's interesting that the first kind of public work was looking at the sea, but presumably you'd had this desire to actually bring water into the sculptures for some time. And I know the most ambitious project that you were able to realize in that respect was the one in Antwerp. It's such a fabulous, ambitious, large expanse of water. It's a beautiful, very dramatic fountain where the water disappears through this chasm and then reappears. And it's been credited with having really transformed this very formal, sterile space in front of a museum. What a fabulous scale with which to start working with water. How did that opportunity arise?
Yeah, it was incredible. It was actually with the architects Robert and Dime that actually renovated and transformed the plaza, the square, and where there was a tram passing by. I mean, the circulation around it, and then they changed it, but it was very present. You know, it was a very nasty place somehow, but it was in front of the Museum of Fine Arts. And so they asked me to do something dealing with that position and gave me that incredible amount of meters to work. And I defended that, as you describe now, that to go deep and the idea of the water disappearing and appearing again could be a very, not only meditative, but also surprising and spectacular way of relating to a work of art. And actually the fact of using water, that is the first time that I use it on a big scale, that actually the piece was accepted and we started in 97, but then it was realized in 2006 for different reasons that stopped it for a long while. But in any case, I was saying that the use of water made me be able to work with time and time in the city to create a sequence that people could relate to, that also would stop the traffic somehow. I mean, not the traffic itself, but yes, the passerby that could maybe is running to work or to meet somebody or coming back it was like an interruption. Or entering the museum and having a piece that you see in a situation, and when you come out is different, and then you maybe stay to see what's happening and contemplate it and look more carefully and more slowly. No, I mean, it was to slow down a bit. So that was, yes, the first time that I really was able to do a piece in a city that could deal with the urbanism and the movement of people in the cities.
Yeah, and it really responded to the scale of the setting as well.
Yes.
Was this sort of as an antidote to, I guess, the way fountains can be quite a bland presence in a way? We just see the water spraying around. We might enjoy the feeling of the air being a little fresher around it, but then we stop looking. We no longer engage with the fountain once we've registered its presence. Whereas when the water is animating the textures and the sort of dynamics of the space, then it's more mesmerizing, more meditative, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Like as in nature.
As in nature, and then you can attend to the fact also myself. By creating them to attend and play with the details is also crucial in many pieces. You know that if you don't look carefully, you don't see it, but if you see it, then it opens your mind. And this is something that I've worked a lot also in other pieces.
I mean, do you feel these currents sort of are emerging perhaps more strongly due to having grown up in somewhere with such a dramatic kind of relationship with the sea, with the coast, as San Sebastian?
Yes, well, actually, as I was telling you, the idea of that would include this idea, or let's say you can work with the fact as a material with time. This is one thing, and also the preoccupation with the climate change, but also to the consciousness of how what is underneath, what is lying underneath is alive, and that we have to care. And all these things were always an inspiration, not only to transmit a message, but also an inspiration for how one can work from a very, urbanistic landscape. They can talk about nature to remember that. I mean, to create a landscape that has the memory of other landscapes. And
The Bloomberg piece really has that, doesn't it? Because you're evoking Lost River, a river that used to run along that course.
Yes, and that was very interesting for me also, because the conversation with Norman Foster was successful in creating a place, as I was saying, of gathering and reflection, instead of constructing a security wall that they had to construct otherwise surrounding the Bloomberg headquarters in London. So it was a way to do an open piece, but creating that distance that would creating like a moat around the castle, let's say. That was very interesting for me, and all the constraints that the city gives you, I mean, or tells you to respect as an artist, to be able to transform them into something that is meaningful in the piece. Yeah.
That's so interesting, because the cities are increasingly filled with private space that looks like public space, but it isn't. And there are many barriers to stop people from feeling like they have access. And yet that work with the kind of stone sort of pediment around it just feels very much like somewhere you can sit. It feels very welcoming and inclusive, but it clearly has that strategic impact of drawing people away from the building, but into the kind of public forecourt. So it's a lovely subtle way of doing what they needed you to do, but while making it seem very welcoming.
Because actually it's a private space that became public, you know? I mean, anybody, even if you don't work in the same building, you have access to it. You can use it as if you are working there. So that made for me also a big difference, because it was the connection between the north and the east. They recuperated an alley that was an old street. So all these things, and to think about the old rivers, the river that used to run under now. Let's think. So all these were issues that became part of the piece and the memory of the history of the place, but also to create a new history, a new memory.
But there's a real sort of precision and sort of interest in the science of geology and botany in your work. And I was really intrigued by the idea that as artists are working much more with different sciences, there's this lovely sort of blending of disciplines. And I know that the geological kind of world has been very enthusiastic about your sort of reflection of, you know, what lies beneath our cities, what lies underneath our feet. You've been invited to symposiums and...
Yes, actually, yeah, the opening of Ondalia, I mean, was an opening where with the university, the complicity of the University of the Basque Country, and we invited geologists and marine biologists and then thinkers from the arts, and a poet that is the one that gave the name to the piece Ondalia, that holds together many meanings, but basically is about depth, is the sea abyss. And so altogether it was very interesting in creating an idea of collaboration also. And as you said, it's true. I mean, my approach is always more abstract and poetic than scientific, but it certainly, as I was saying, works with the memory of the landscape. And though I construct fictions with the natural, with the visible and the invisible natural that we were seeing, with the rocks and strata that form the cross of the planet, but also with the consciousness of the existence of underground life. And I think all this together is a field that we can share with scientists and artists and historians, you know, people that we all can think about it. And even if it's, art can have that symbolic and can have a voice, which is not it has to be there, even if, of course, the people that do the work, we all have to do from our point, from where we can have to do something, because it's traumatic, no, the situation we are living. And I think as artists also, even though, as I said, I work in more abstract field, and of course there are many details that that also require a long and deep investigation in my own
Absolutely. But there is, I mean, it is wonderful to be in San Sebastian and to then visit Hondelea and then to be back in the city. And that knowledge of the experience that you've had on the lighthouse makes the promenade around the edges of the city that much more magical. And
Yes, because everything
the
is visible
formations
there.
of the rocks, I mean, there are such distinctive rock formations around there. You know, there's a real dialogue between the sort of bronze kind of sculpture that you've made in the lighthouse and the rocks around. And I hope that most people will feel a new sort of respect or wonder about that landscape and the importance of paying attention to it.
Yes, certainly. And actually, even, people are very spontaneously telling me that, of course, that was also my idea, that as you are describing the journey to it, and to discover more the island, and then to enter in the house, to have the experience inside, and to come back with all that, the journey back is all part of the piece, no? And it is in your memory. And then when you look at the house that is, as you saw, present from many points of view of San Sebastian, you think you know what is in there. So
yeah, it's like having a little secret or having access to something that was secret. But I love the story of how it came about, and you were given the choice of a number, I guess a number of specific sites, or you were given an option to create something, and you chose that option.
Yes, well, actually, I thought, I was, of course, I mean, I was, I just dared to give that option, it was not obvious. But it was the perfect storm, I used to say, because it was abandoned, I knew, from the 60s. So it was a problem because it was deteriorating, etc. And the boat takes only 10 minutes. So is the remote, but in the city. And so the mayor and the city immediately accepted and say, well, let's. And then we had other supports from the university and some others that. So that was fantastic to collaborate and to with also with the hydraulic engineers, structural engineers, a lot of. I mean, it was a very complex.
Very complex, very ambitious.
Very ambitious.
And also, you were in charge of the architecture as well as the sculpture, so you were bringing these interests together.
Let's say as a director, because as I said, a lot of people have collaborated. I had a fantastic structural engineer that made sure that when we empty all the inside of the house, it would hold everything, all the walls. And well, we had to pay attention to so many things. And as you saw, also the light inside with the alabaster and how it comes from above. That also is, there are these solar panels, but they are hidden by a structure, a jalousie that makes it less brilliant. But anyway, there's so many details that I had to.
But it's an artist's take on refurbishment. You've got, as you said, these beautiful alabaster panels in the windows, so they allow a filtered, very delicate light in, and you've got this gorgeous copper ceiling that shines like the roof of the actual beacon, the lighthouse beacon. Has this extra ambitious project given you more ambition to do something again on this scale, or do you think this is a one-off?
Well, it's a one-off. I mean, it's the marvelous thing. I mean, also with other projects that like Toledo, but also some things I've done with architects, is that they are always unique because they are referred to a site, to different conditions, and I'm so interested in that, to develop ideas that sometimes you can share in the projects, no? Like Toledo also had a tower that is one of the 3 sites there. But and I share some of the ideas that I developed there, but they're always unique. And I hope that I can find in the days and years to come that I have other opportunities, you know, to do these unique works. But
I mean, you have some very major architects as fans, Norman Foster and Renzo Piano among them. I write about architecture as well as art, and I'm always struck by how architects really would love to see themselves as artists, but they often need an artist to come on board to allow, you know, I guess, more daring, more creative sort of leaps to push the envelope of what's possible in a building, because there are so many constraints and restrictions and budgetary problems with the architecture itself, just to create the building that is habitable and functional and delightful. What do you feel that you bring? What do you feel that they look to you for in these collaborations?
Well, I think in each case is different, of course, but I suppose you said it, that I enter into them. I think that always a piece, even if it collaborates with the building, even with problems the building may have of having a too big entrance or whatever, things that are needing a shadow that doesn't go with the building, has to be an added thing. I always think that that piece that I do needs to have and has to have an autonomy, even if it collaborates with the building. And in that sense, I think I don't, like, as you mentioned with Renzo Piano, I was connecting the city of Santa, the city urbanism of the city itself with the sea through a park, drawing with these wells, what the plaza, the square below the building was, and creating again a place for people to wait, maybe to others to enter together, and then the rhythm of the water inside the pieces, and so. And then with, for example, another example, no water but movement, that made me also was an important piece, was with Rafael Moneo, with the extension of the Prado. That there he asked me to think in terms of a door, and I actually have done passages and alleys, but not a door as such. And I said, well, can I think in terms of 6-element gates that will move during the day, because it's a door that opens every day, but it's not the main entrance with tickets and so it's more ceremonial. It opens totally in big days, but it was, yes, like a passage between the city and the Temple of the Imaginary, the museum. So I asked him if I could develop these 6 elements that will move 6 times a day, and create different spaces to be, that the passerby without entering could be there. And he was very generous to allow me that, because that he didn't have that in mind. He asked me to design a door. And so it became like a public piece, you know. So it was,
he wouldn't have dreamed of suggesting something like that, but it takes an artist to dream.
Yeah, but it was, I mean, it started with asking me a collaboration to give a solution to that. So projects grow in different ways, but also in the Norman Foster Foundation here in Madrid, they had I did one of these hanging pieces that create with text, shadows, and because it's meant to work for the future with materials, or it was a carbonate that I never used before. So it was all an experimentation, and it was very, very interesting. And again, has its own autonomy between two buildings.
What do you feel are, the best qualities in a true collaboration?
Well, I think the best qualities is to understand each other, and I think that grows with solutions that if there are problems, one gives us a solution and we accept, and da, da, da. So, and then is the best, grows the best collaboration, which is, I more and more, I love to collaborate even with other artists. I would like to, also to bring ideas together. But when I did, for example, also the piece at the bottom of the sea in the Sea of Cortez in Baja California, I collaborated with marine biologists that we were within a program of national marine refuge. And so it was very successful in the sense of understanding each other, not that the piece is a very, again, philosophical, poetical, idea, but is there, and we could talk about it and talk about the urgency to create places that are preserved, and yeah, I think that's, I would say, the best qualities, that understanding.
The conversations, you said it yourself, if the creation of your work is the fruit of many conversations and the piece itself can provoke conversations, then it's doing that's part of its role, isn't it? Do you feel, given that there's a growth of interest, I feel certainly personally, and I think in general, much greater interest in these kind of multidisciplinary works that kind of reveal something of the science of what's going on around us, whether it's geology or botany or bee pollination. We're much more interested in this now. Do you feel that these conversations that artists are provoking can have an impact? Do you see an impact?
Well, it's difficult to say to see because they are so urgent, and but it is also urgent to take decisions and to transmit problems and urgencies that we have to work now in order to see in the future, not to do only things that we see immediately. And I believe a lot that also in education, that not meaning that art should be educative, but it should be, I work on perception, and I would like to open minds, not only to any message that I'm giving, is more to transmit that attitude, towards looking to something, listening to something. And I think in that sense, we are more and more aware, and there are many artists that are also involved in trying to collaborate in this urgency that we...
Definitely. It's often been said that art is about making visible the invisible, but I think it's also about making visible what we need to be paying attention to, and perhaps what we're not paying enough attention to. That's very important. Public art, especially where it involves expense or inconvenience, can be a little problematic. And I'm just wondering about the extent to which there was almost a silver lining to the way that Hondalea was introduced to the public, in that there could be no big grand opening full of important guests or visitors or art critics, because it was June and it was the pandemic time. So it seemed that the people of San Sebastian got to take the sculpture, their work, to their hearts and claim it as their own for the first few months, which I can imagine was actually immensely beneficial for, I guess, the way people feel, local people feel about the sculpture and what it means to them.
Absolutely, because also was to say, well, the island is public, it belongs to everybody. So you can go there, and this piece will talk about our memory, as I was saying, etc., and create new memories for the citizens. And it's very beautiful how each one relates to it in its own way. But it's, as you said, it was very nice that they could feel that they were the first ones, visiting the piece that was on in their own city, and actually we had already this idea because of the collaborative aspects that we are commenting on with scientists and people from the arts, etc., to open it in the university, to open it with this symposium. So it all, made a very interesting connection, because it was just the symposium, and immediately was open to the public. And so, and along the, as you said, because of the situation of the post-COVID, while COVID still, people would go, very, everybody that could go went, and it was has been very positive. And
I heard similar things. The only other foreign trip I've made this year was to Helsinki, and I really wanted to see the Helsinki Art Biennial there, because it seemed to have such a great principle of, low carbon, and sort of drawing people out to an island that they couldn't visit until about 10 years ago. And again, because tourists couldn't come, and the people of Helsinki really got to claim it for their own. I heard one of the art biennial people say there were plenty of people in Helsinki who were like, well, what do we need an art biennial for? I'm not going to go to that. Yeah. And then they were just completely won over, because it was such a wonderful experience, and because there was this free boat ride, and it was, the word was able to trickle through the community to say, this is something you should really do, and you should go many, many times. And that's such a lovely act of generosity.
Creates, as you say, community, that sense of community, which is
yes, absolutely. I guess my last question, well, no, there's a wonderful question I really wanted to put to you, because about the male and female aesthetic. I remember not so long ago a big debate in sort of London architectural circles about, the way the city, especially one like London, which has so many great big tall buildings being constructed, how the urban fabric is becoming more and more male. And there is something, I remember going out into nature while this debate was going on and just thinking, but nature is so female. There are so many curves. There is so, there are clefts and crevices and caves, and, why is this not reflected more? And here you are with your art doing a lot of that wonderful reflection. Do you feel in any conscious way that you are bringing a female aesthetic, or is it more of you're humanizing that very hard urban environment?
Yeah, I feel, yes, of course I have the voice of a woman, and I hope it's human, no, honestly. But it's true that the problem is that I think that also, even if that's my language, what I said, that's part of my language, the invasion by humans to the natural limits, of the rivers, the sea, etc., is what brings disasters when nature gets, suddenly that it happens, of course, and more now with the extreme climate change, that you have floods and they find their way, but we have constructed there on their limits, So, and these are humans that we do. It's not. So it's difficult to. I don't like to. I understand your question, because you are right that it's impulsive, to impose what you think is what we don't want to anymore. And again, we
it's
come
the
to
importance.
this.
It's more the kind of constructed urban fabric versus nature is the issue, more than masculine versus female aesthetic. I imagine you saying.
Yes, and to work on those limits and borders to make them smoother and connected. No?
Yeah.
We have to work on that.
Yeah, to remind people. In a way, I love that your work sort of makes a memorial, a sort of monument to nature.
Yeah.
To keep it in people's minds.
Yes,
I guess my last question was really, what landscapes or terrains are you still excited about working in? What do you have a sort of a couple of projects that you're really excited to have on the go for the next year or two?
Yes, I'm involved in different projects. I always work in different projects at the same time. Some are small and happen in my studio, like drawing and preparing a couple of gallery exhibitions, and also a piece for the courtyard of the Royal Academy in London.
Oh yes,
for the summer. Yeah. That also you will see, but it's a small pavilion that deals with nature in different aspects, and also I'm immersed in now fabricating a piece that will go at the Madison Square Park in New York. So it's another. It's like an underground or something that will. So I'm working on different things and sometimes dreaming of others, and some are more long term, but these are the ones that I have just in front of me.
Wow, well, wonderful. I look forward to seeing the Royal Academy. When is that finishing? Next year, is it?
Yes, well, for this summer, it will be the very beginning of June.
Okay, fabulous. Well, I wish you luck with all of these projects.
And I hope we meet there, if not before.
Yes, I hope we'll meet in London. Thank you so much, Cristina. Great to talk.
Thank you so much to you. Really.